The Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders. Between 1972 and 73, at least 7 young women vanished while hitching rides in Sonoma County, California. Their bodies were later found in remote ravines and creek beds. The killer navigated the foggy highways of Santa Rosa with chilling, calculated precision, picking out vulnerable targets who never reached their destination. Maureen Sterling and Yvonne Weber vanished on February 4th, 1972, after an ice skating trip. The two friends were just enjoying a winter night when they decided to hitchhike home. Their remains wouldn't be discovered until December 28th of that very same year. Bound and skeletal, they were dumped like trash in a remote spot only a local would know. A pattern emerged, revealing a predator who knew the landscape of Sonoma County inside and out. 19-year-old Kim Wendy Allen was discovered on March 4th, 1972. Her body showed signs of strangulation after a brutal assault. The killer left her near a creek embankment, a calling card that would show up again in later cases. The site suggested the killer took victims to specific dumping grounds rather than picking spots at random. Lori Lee Cursa, reported as a runaway, was found on December 14, 1972, with a broken neck. The coroner determined she died from deliberate force to her neck, specifically the cervical vertebrae, ruling out any chance the injury came from a fall or car accident. Carolyn Davis died from strychnine poisoning. Her body was found on July 31, 1973. Using poison was a major shift from previous strangulations. This suggested either the killer's methods were evolving or a different person was responsible entirely. Strychnine causes agonizing convulsions before the lungs fail, meaning she suffered far longer than the victims who were quickly strangled. Before vanishing, Davis left her mother a note saying, "Dear Mom, don't worry too much about me. Love, Carolyn." The last known victim was 23-year-old Teresa Walsh, found hogtied and strangled on December 28, 1973. Her body was placed near a ravine, bound with the same unique rope work as earlier victims, strengthening the theory of a single serial killer with a very specific, ritualistic way of dumping bodies. In 1979, an unidentified woman was found in a duffel bag, hog-tied, just like Teresa Walsh. Experts determined she'd been dead for about 3 years, placing her murder right in the middle of the other crimes. This Jane Doe remained nameless for decades, a frustrating mystery that haunted the entire investigation for years. Without a name, police couldn't track her last moves or link her to the other victims. By late 2023, the 1979 Jane Doe was identified as Nanette Suzanne Overacre, who vanished in 1975 at age 19. The varied methods, strangulation, poisoning, and blunt force trauma made linking the cases difficult. Still, the location and victim profiles pointed to one active serial killer. All victims were found within a 15-mile radius, and every single one had been hitchhiking. Detectives pursued many different leads over the years. The Zodiac Killer was considered due to strange symbols at the scenes, but no physical evidence ever linked him to the Santa Rosa cold cases. Ted Bundy, who was active nearby, was ruled out after an alibi placed him in Washington state during several of these disappearances. Arthur Lee Allen, a prime Zodiac suspect, was looked at closely, but no physical proof tied him to the Soma cases. Other names like Frederick Manali and Jim Morai came up, with Morai's DNA finally submitted for testing in 2022. Every suspect had strong ties to Sonoma County at the time, but none could be definitively caught using the limited forensic evidence of the 1970s. The motive seemed to be pure, opportunistic predation. Targeting hitchhikers at a time when catching a ride from a stranger was incredibly common. Young women traveling alone were the most vulnerable, with zero control over who pulled over to pick them up. The killer knew these remote body dumping grounds well. This indicates he lived in Sonoma County or knew its rural landscape, including dirt roads and creek access points rarely seen by the public. The recent HBO documentary, The Truth About Jim, looked closely at whether Morkai was actually involved in the crime. Even though fresh leads have not led to an arrest yet, detectives keep the case open, reviewing forensic evidence as DNA technology continues to get better. How do these women connect to a case where the proof points somewhere else entirely? The murder of Cheri Jo Bates. On the night of October 30th, 1966, 18-year-old Cheri Jo Bates arrived at the college library intending to study before heading home. When she walked to her car in the lot later that night, she found it sabotaged. The distributor coil and condenser were gone, making the vehicle completely useless. This calculated trap left Bates stranded in the dark parking lot, while her killer waited silently between rows of cars. What followed proved that Cheri Jo fought desperately to stay alive. Evidence found at the scene included strands of torn hair, skin trapped under her nails, and defensive wounds all over her hands and arms. The coroner found several stabs and slashes on her neck and chest, proving that the brutal struggle went on for several minutes. They even found a Timex watch lying near her body. Its face was shattered and the band snapped, likely torn off the killer's wrist during the fight. Police also recovered a unique shoe print size 8 to 10 and several fingerprints from the outside of the car and its handles. A motive was hard to find during the initial investigation. Nothing was stolen. Her textbooks, purse, and other belongings were left right where they were. The medical examiner found no signs of other criminal intent beyond the fatal attack, which ruled out common motives for these types of crimes. Months after the attack, mysterious letters reached the police and local press, with a writer claiming the murder was revenge for being rejected. One chilling letter included the phrase, "making her pay for all the brush-offs. It is about time for you to die." However, these letters were later found to be fakes with no connection to the real killer. Ross Sullivan, a library worker who had easy access to the parking lot, emerged as a key person of interest early on. Sullivan's odd behavior after the incident quickly caught the attention of investigators. This included missing work without an excuse and matching the description from local witnesses. Decades later, some pointed to Gary Francis' post, linking him to the Bates incident and the infamous Zodiac serial killer series. Riverside police rejected these ideas, saying there was no real forensic proof to back the theories. The possible link to the Zodiac killer still sparks huge debate among true crime investigators. Some forensic experts noted that the taunting letters sent after her death mirrored confirmed Zodiac writings, especially in the tone and phrasing of the threats. A poem called The Confession surfaced shortly after the murder. It contained disturbing details about the murder that only the police and the killer should know. In 2021, the Riverside Police Department announced that DNA from the 1967 stamps belonged to a man who admitted the confession letters were just a sick teenage prank, officially disconnecting them from the crime. This new evidence finally separated those letters from the actual crime, although it did not help identify who actually murdered Cheri Jo, or explain why anyone would falsely claim responsibility so many years after the murder. The physical evidence from 1966 could still be solved using modern forensic tools. The hair, biological material from her fingernails, and that recovered watch all carry genetic samples that can be analyzed. These modern DNA extraction and sequencing methods were unavailable during the original investigation. Fingerprints found at the scene still do not match any names in current databases. This suggests the killer either had no criminal record or simply avoided being arrested for anything that required his prints. The next case unfolded under bizarre circumstances, leaving more questions than real answers. Mitrice Richardson. On September 17, 2009, 24-year-old Mitrice acted strangely while dining at Jeffrey's in Malibu. Staff noticed she seemed disoriented, making strange comments that scared other customers and had nothing to do with reality. Once dinner was over, Richardson couldn't pay her bill, which forced the restaurant staff to call the police for help. Cops arrested her for the unpaid tab and found certain substances on her during the booking process. They took her to the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station for processing while they figured out the right charges. Around midnight that night, deputies released her without her car, phone, or purse. Everything she owned stayed locked up at the station. Even with her confused state in the late hour, nobody arranged a safe ride or a place to stay. Letting her go into the dark, unfamiliar mountains would soon spark huge controversy and massive lawsuits. Richardson walked out of the station and straight into the dark Santa Monica Mountains. It was a place of steep hills, thick brush, and very few homes. A local in Monte Nido reported seeing her in their backyard hours after she was let go. She looked lost, trying to find her way through the private property. This was the very last time an independent witness saw her alive. Nearly 11 months went by before her remains were found on August 9, 2010, in a hidden part of Dark Canyon by rangers looking for illegal drug farms. The body sat 6 miles from the station she left, She was found deep in terrain that would have taken massive effort to reach by walking alone. They found her body naked and in a very advanced state of decay. The dry canyon air and lack of bugs had actually caused her body to naturally mummify over time. The state of her remains made forensic work difficult, as the rotting tissue made toxicology tests and injury checks impossible. The coroner couldn't find a clear cause of death after checking the bones and the damaged tissue. Even though the official cause of death was listed as undetermined, police moving the body before the coroner arrived completely ruined the integrity of the scene. This led to a settlement with her family for mishandling the entire investigation. The lack of clothes and the remote spot raised deep questions about how she reached that canyon and what really happened in the 11 months before her discovery. Her family doubted the story right away. Her father, Michael Richardson, believed that his daughter had been kidnapped and taken against her will. He claimed she was taken there, tortured, and then murdered once they were finished with her. The family sued Los Angeles County in a civil lawsuit, claiming the police released her into danger and failed to properly search for her while she was still missing. This legal battle ended with a settlement, but the county never admitted fault, and no criminal charges ever came from the internal probe. A major break happened when reporters named Rick Forsberg as a person of interest, using database searches and geographic data. Forsberg had a criminal record for property crimes and lived right in the Monte Nido area when Richardson first disappeared. This put him close to where she was last seen and where she was found. Searching Forsberg's former hideout revealed pieces of women's clothing and other personal belongings in the immediate area. But they couldn't prove the items belonged to Richardson because they were so badly damaged. However, Forsberg died in 2019 before detectives could formally question him, ending any chance for a real DNA match or testimony. Why this happened to Richardson is still a mystery for investigators and her family. Some officials think her mental health. She may have been struggling with a hidden bipolar condition, wandering into the wilderness before finally succumbing to the harsh elements over several lonely days. Yet her family and private detectives believe something darker happened, that she met a predator in those fragile hours, right after she was released. Maybe Forsberg or a nameless stranger targeted her while she was lost and confused. Sadly, the state of her remains left no real answers, making it impossible to prove either theory today. A $20,000 reward is still out there for anyone with answers. But years earlier, in another Hollywood home, police found more clues but less closure. Georgette Bauerdorf. On October 12, 1944, neighbors in a West Hollywood apartment found 20-year-old Georgette Bauerdorf dead in her own bathtub. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. A bandage had been shoved down her throat. She died of asphyxiation, and the room showed every sign that she had fought for her life. Bruises lined her arms and hands, classic defensive wounds proving she didn't go down without a massive struggle. She spent several agonizing minutes fighting her attacker before he finally managed to overpower her. Interestingly, someone had unscrewed the nightlight in her bedroom. The killer wanted total darkness to hide his face and work. This pointed to a planned attack by someone who knew the layout. Bauerdorf came from a wealthy oil family with massive holdings in Texas and California, but she lived on her own in West Hollywood, while volunteering as a hostess at the Hollywood Canteen. It was a popular spot for soldiers during the Second World War. Servicemen went there to dance, relax, and rub shoulders with stars before being shipped off to the front lines or training camps. Her car was found dumped blocks away. Investigators saw the interior was a mess of panic. The driver's door was still open, and the keys were hanging right in the ignition. The way the car was left suggested the killer knew exactly where to ditch it fast. He likely used side streets to vanish, avoiding the main roads where police might have spotted his getaway. A neighbor heard her screaming, "Stop! Stop! You're killing me!" she yelled. But they didn't call the police. They thought it was just a domestic. They assumed it was a couple's spat, not a murder in progress. That tragic delay likely cost Georgette those last vital minutes of her life. Those screams meant the attack happened somewhere between 10:30 and 11:15 that night in October. It looks like a physical assault that turned deadly when things went sideways. The medical examiner confirmed the struggle happened before she was finally and fatally choked. It wasn't a robbery. Her expensive jewelry was left behind. Even her family's valuable collection and other high-end items weren't touched by the killer. He attacked her first, using a bandage to silence her, but he shoved it too deep. What started as an assault ended in a tragic accidental death. Between the unscrewed light and the broken window, this wasn't random. This killer had a plan. He had been watching her, learning her habits, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Police looked closely at the soldiers from the Hollywood canteen where she spent her nights dancing and volunteering. Detectives built long lists of men who seemed a bit too obsessed with her, or kept asking for dances. Witnesses remembered a tall soldier hanging around her apartment building in the weeks before the murder, just watching the people come and go. He was always there, lurking by the entrance, studying her routine. But he was never caught, even after hundreds of interviews with soldiers stationed across Los Angeles. Cosmo Volpe, a regular from the canteen, was a prime suspect. But his alibi actually checked out. He was back at the barracks when the murder happened. Men like Jeremiah Reed and others gave fake confessions, but the police kept looking for the real killer. Eventually, they turned their focus to a soldier named Gordon Lee Carter. His sketchy behavior and pawned goods sparked intense investigation before police finally cleared him as a suspect. Detectives realized Sumter's claims about the apartment layout were factually incorrect and suspicious. He got the body's position wrong, along with secret crime scene facts that police never released to the public. No physical evidence or witness could prove he was even in California when the murder took place. The official inquiry into Georgette's death ruled it a homicide committed by an unknown person or persons. The investigation went cold fast because of outside pressure to wrap it up immediately. Some historians blame wartime secrets for the stall. The family's high social status likely swayed the police to stop hunting for suspects altogether. Decades later, armchair detectives linked the mystery to the Black Dahlia case from 3 years after. While no real forensics back this up, the victims shared hauntingly similar profiles that keep theorists talking. Things would get just as messy in a case involving true Hollywood royalty. Bonnie Lee Bakley. On the night of May 4th, 2001, 44-year-old Bonnie Lee Bakley was found dying in a car near Vitello's restaurant in Studio City, California. She had just finished dinner with her husband, actor Robert Blake, right before the attack. Blake claimed he went back inside the restaurant to grab a firearm he legally carried for protection, but found his wife wounded when he returned. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, but she died from gunshot wounds to her head and shoulder. Bakley had a long history of having run questionable money schemes, targeting men through personal ads, which became the focus of the investigation. She was dating several men at once, including Christian Brando, the son of film legend Marlon Brando. When she got pregnant, DNA tests proved Robert Blake was the father, which forced them into a marriage. Blake was reportedly miserable with the setup, seeing the wedding as a chore rather than a choice. In April 2002, police arrested Blake, claiming he hired hitmen to kill his wife. At the trial, 2 stuntmen testified that Blake actually asked them to take Bakley out. However, their stories fell apart during cross-examination, as lawyers pointed out major lies and motives for making things up. The state relied mostly on witness stories and circumstantial clues that had zero physical or forensic evidence to back them up. In March 2005, the jury cleared Blake of all criminal charges. They decided the prosecution simply failed to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But a civil trial later found Blake liable for her death, ordering a $30 million payout that was eventually cut to $15 million by an appeals court. This split result, innocent in crime but liable in civil court, remains a massive legal controversy today. Christian Brando had actually threatened her before, saying she was lucky no one had put a bullet in her head yet. This was caught on tape. Detectives checked where Brando was that night, but nothing put him at the scene of the crime. The real shooter has never been identified using forensics or any other solid proof. Police found the murder weapon in a dumpster right near Blake's home, but ballistics tests couldn't prove the gun belonged to Blake or anyone else specifically. To this day, the case stays unsolved because nobody was ever convicted for the killing. Another famous Hollywood tragedy would leave investigators with a mountain of conflicting evidence. Natalie Wood. On November 29, 1981, her body was found in the water off Catalina Island. She was on a yacht called Splendor with her husband Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, and the boat captain, Dennis Davern. The Los Angeles County coroner first ruled it an accidental drowning, citing alcohol as a major contributing factor. But the mystery of how she hit the water remained. With everyone on board, giving different accounts of that night. Wood was famously terrified of water, a deep fear born from childhood trauma and dark prophecies. This psychological element made her jumping into the dark ocean at night feel completely out of character for her established habits. The examiner found bruises and scrapes on her body that didn't look like they came from a simple fall. These injuries raised serious questions about what really happened right before she hit the water. Wagner and Walken admitted they had a heated argument that evening before she went missing, though both insisted the fight was just shouting, never physical. Captain Davern later claimed he heard a much more violent clash than he first reported, though his changing story over the decades raised major questions about his reliability. The yacht's inflatable dinghy was found drifting near the same spot where they recovered Wood's body. This suggested she might have been trying to tie it down or climb aboard before drowning. In 2011, police reopened the file, calling it a suspicious death instead of an accident. This new classification came after experts took a fresh look at the forensic evidence. Those bruises specifically pointed to a struggle or some kind of forceful contact before she died. By 2018, investigators named Wagner a person of interest when new witnesses came forward, including boat captain Dennis Davern, who provided updated accounts of a violent argument on deck before Wood vanished. In May 2022, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department announced they had run out of leads and the case went cold. However, they stated clearly that Robert Wagner has not been cleared and is still a person of interest. Even so, the cause of death is still listed as drowning and other undetermined factors. That specific wording highlights the massive mystery of Wood's final moments in the water. Theories range from a tragic accident while securing the boat to her entering the water in distress, or even darker scenarios involving a violent confrontation on the yacht. Without anyone actually seeing her go overboard, we may never get a definitive answer. The physical evidence, the bruising, the alcohol, her position could really fit many different versions of the story. The file stays open, with her death ruled undetermined instead of a clear accident or a crime. If you have made it this far and enjoy deep dives into these shocking criminal cases, hit subscribe. But these unsolved mysteries happen far beyond the bright lights of Hollywood. Georgia Lee Moses. On August 13, 1997, a young woman was last seen leaving a Santa Rosa gas station with an unknown man. Her body was found on August 22, 1997, under a grove of trees near a highway off-ramp. She had been lying there for about a week before a passing driver spotted her. The medical examiner determined she died from asphyxiation caused by strangulation. Her body was found without clothes, and decomposition made collecting physical evidence nearly impossible. The victim lived in a tough home environment where she had to step up and take on caretaker responsibilities for her family. These personal struggles did not make her death any less of a tragedy, but they do show the vulnerability that likely put her in a killer's path. That gas station where she was last seen became the center of the murder investigation. With only security footage and a few witnesses, leads were incredibly hard to find. Police eventually created a sketch of the man who walked away with her that night. The sketch showed a man, and law enforcement blasted the image across Sonoma County, hoping someone in the community would recognize him and finally put a name to the face. Though the sketch went everywhere, no solid leads came in during the initial search, or even in the decades since. He remains a ghost, and that lack of identity is the biggest hurdle for justice. Why she was strangled remains a mystery, with no evidence or witnesses to explain it. Since her clothes were missing at the scene, investigators suspected motives beyond just the murder, but the condition of the body made it impossible to prove what happened before she died. Finding her off Highway 101 near Petaluma meant she was moved from Santa Rosa, the last place anyone saw her alive. That meant a car was used, or the killer knew the walking routes incredibly well. This case shed light on the unfair gaps in media attention and police funding for victims from different walks of life. Her sister, Angel Turner, has fought for the truth for decades, saying she was basically like a mother. She was everything a mom should be. Angel's constant pleas have kept the story in the news. Still, even with the extra eyes, no real breaks have come through. In April 2025, the Press Democrat pushed for fresh eyes on the murder, arguing that no cold case is ever too old to be solved for the family. A $50,000 reward stands for tips that lead to the arrest and conviction of whoever did this. It is one of the biggest bounties ever offered for a cold case in Northern California. While the cash hasn't triggered a breakthrough just yet, the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office keeps the file open, rechecking evidence as new forensic tech becomes available. That old composite sketch is still the best lead they have. But 30 years have passed, making it hard to find anyone who saw that mystery man back in August 1997. Preserved DNA from her remains might finally pay off through modern genetic genealogy. That is, if they can find a match for the man in the sketch. No other similar stranglings happened nearby back then, suggesting the killer was either a one-time offender or just very good at hiding his tracks. Her family still hopes for closure, even though they know how hard it is when the physical evidence is ruined by time and the main suspect has managed to dodge every traditional police method. Another case shows exactly how rubbing elbows with celebrities can mess up investigations. Christa Helm. On February 12, 1977, aspiring actress Christa Helm was found dead on a sidewalk in West Hollywood near Lloyd Place, ambushed right after she stepped out of her car. It was a brutal, frenzied attack that police say looked more like pure rage than a cold execution. The coroner found 22 or 23 stab wounds all over her body, along with blunt force trauma, hinting that the killer used more than one weapon during the assault. The overkill suggested this was personal, definitely not just a random robbery or a crime of opportunity. Christa moved to LA from Milwaukee, dreaming of making it big in the Hollywood movie industry. She landed small TV roles and worked as a model while waiting for her big break on screen. Her inner circle was packed with some of Hollywood's biggest power players. From famous actors to high-level executives and producers, these high-profile connections would soon become the focal point of the entire murder investigation. The most shocking discovery was Christa's collection of private diaries and audio tapes, which allegedly detailed her secret relationships with some of Hollywood's biggest stars. Detectives believed that these specific items, filled with secrets about private affairs, might have pushed someone to kill Helm before that dirt ever went public. Helm's black book and tapes were gone, but police did manage to find some of her personal diaries. They were packed with names of famous celebrities, but those leads went nowhere. There just was not enough physical evidence to link those stars to the brutal street attack. Helm had actually told friends she was worried about her situation. She even sent a postcard saying, quote, "I am in way over my head here." This suggested she knew she was in danger because of the people she knew. Looking at her mail, investigators saw a woman who knew she was being targeted. Still, she never wrote down exactly who or what she was so afraid of. During the murder probe, two specific people became the main persons of interest. Patty Collins, a friend of Helm, vanished right after the murder and has never been found. Her sudden disappearance, along with her ties to Helm, made her look incredibly guilty, even without DNA at the crime scene. Another associate, Rudy Masella, reportedly bragged about knowing exactly what happened to Helm that night. These claims could not be proven with hard evidence or by any reliable witness. Neither Collins nor Masella was ever formally charged. Since Collins is still missing, police cannot bring her in for modern questioning. From 2006 to 2008, detectives reopened the cold case file for fresh interviews. They interviewed actors, roommates, and her own family. Her sister Marissa even thought jealousy was the motive. They hoped someone would finally reveal secrets kept since the original investigation. This new push gave investigators more background on Helm's messy private life, but it still did not provide the forensic proof needed to make an arrest. Most people think those missing diaries held enough dirt to ruin careers, which gave powerful people a reason to bury them. Her ties to Hollywood made the whole investigation a complete nightmare for police, with witnesses likely too scared to talk about their own shady business or what others were doing. The pure rage of the attack suggested a personal grudge or panic, not a professional hit. But the fact that the diaries were stolen shows this was not just random violence. In March 2025, a podcast looked at the case again, diving into theories and suspects from the last 50 years. This case is still officially open with the Los Angeles Sheriff. While the investigation is stalled because many witnesses have died since 1977, the mystery remains. Not having those diaries or tapes makes it impossible to run modern forensic tests for fingerprints. We could have found DNA or trace evidence from whoever touched those items. things were just as confusing in another cold case from the underground music world. Peter Ivers. On March 3, 1983, musician and TV host Peter Ivers was found dead in his LA loft. He had been beaten to death with a hammer or some other heavy tool, suffering terrible blunt force trauma to his head. The scene left police wondering if the killer was someone he knew, or if they had forced their way in. Because the loft was in a neighborhood full of artists and musicians, plenty of people knew exactly where Ivers lived and his daily routine. Ivers was born September 20th, 1946, in Illinois. He lived in Chicago until his father passed away in 1949. After spending a little time in Arizona, the family moved to Brookline, Massachusetts, where Ivers grew up from age 4. He was a brilliant student, studying languages at Harvard, while also chasing the musical dreams that would define his whole life. His sharp mind was matched. His musical talent helped him stand out in both scholarly and entertainment circles. By the early 1980s, Ivers was hosting New Wave Theater, a cable show highlighting rising punk and new wave bands. His quirky vibe and eye for weird talent made the show a cult classic in underground music circles, even if it never found big mainstream success. Balancing indie street cred with a shot at fame meant Ivers met some very intense people, many of whom struggled with the addiction and instability common in that era of music. The forensic evidence showed a brutal, focused attack, with several blows to the head causing a fatal traumatic brain injury. Private investigator David Charbonneau, who looked into the cold case, said he did not believe it was a break-in. He figured the killer was either invited in or already had a key. Since there were no defensive wounds, it seems the attack happened totally out of nowhere, giving him no chance to fight back or escape. David Jove, a partner on the show, became a person of interest because friends described their working relationship as incredibly hostile and tense. Rumors swirled about fights over creative vision and money involving the production of the show. While these arguments never turned violent before the murder, the bad blood between them was real. Jove always claimed he was innocent and was never arrested, but Ivers' friends never stopped doubting him. Jove died in 2004 without ever facing a single formal charge in the case. Detectives are still just guessing when it comes to a possible motive. Theories range from a work grudge to a robbery gone wrong, or even fallout from the wild 1980s music scene. The sheer brutality of the beating pointed toward pure rage or a cold desire to kill. It was not a warning or a scare tactic that simply went too far. Police believe the killer used a heavy, industrial strength tool as a weapon. A tape dispenser, or studio gear, found nearby suggests the murder was a crime of passion, using whatever was in the room. The crime scene was contaminated by people wandering in before police arrived, which ruined the forensic evidence. Too many people had moved through the apartment after the body was found. They messed up the crime scene and introduced foreign materials that confused testing. This mess, along with the basic forensic tech of the early 1980s, meant any DNA evidence was either ruined or completely invisible to scientists back then. A new podcast about the cold case launched in 2023. It featured interviews with old friends and a deep dive into 40 years of police files. While shows like the LA Report have explored this case, the best investigation is still the 2008 biography written by Josh Frank. That book pushed the LAPD to reopen the case, but the old crime scene was just too messy to solve. Even with all the new media hype, no fresh forensic clues have surfaced to help identify the killer. This murder remains an open case with the LAPD, but the trail has gone cold as leads dried up and important witnesses either grew old or passed away. But another case would finally see some action after decades of total silence. Asha Degree. On February 14th, 2000, a little girl from Shelby, North Carolina, not California, but famous in the true crime world, vanished into thin air after leaving her home in the middle of the night. Drivers on Highway 18 saw her walking through a storm in the dark. It was a bizarre sight for that hour. When people stopped to help, she ran away, disappearing into the thick woods along the road. That strange behavior baffled everyone trying to figure out why she was out there alone. Asha was known to be very shy and cautious, with a deep fear of dogs, loud storms, and the dark. Her quiet nature made walking out into a midnight storm seem totally out of character for the young girl. People wondered if someone she trusted lured her away, or if she was actually running from something at home. Her parents took lie detector tests and were cleared. Police found no reason at home for the child to just get up and leave. In 2001, her backpack was found wrapped in plastic off Highway 18, 26 miles from where she vanished. The spot where they found the bag suggested someone drove it there instead of her walking that far. The double plastic bags meant whoever left it was trying to hide it or keep the contents safe. The bag held her things but gave police very few clues when they first opened it up. Technology just wasn't advanced enough back in the early 2000s. For almost 25 years, it stayed a missing person case, even though no one had seen or heard from Asha since February 2000. By September 2024, police officially called this a murder investigation, pouring new resources and energy into the hunt. This massive shift followed new forensic testing on the evidence kept from the backpack and other items from the original search. Unsealed court documents from 2025 revealed that DNA on the girl's undershirt and those trash bags matched two men, Roy Dedman and Russell Underhill. Both men are dead now, but police believe Underhill might have been the one who first grabbed her. These matches turned the spotlight on the dead man family. Now, Roy, Connie, and their daughters are all being looked at as people of interest. Search warrants served at Dead Man Properties in April 2025 looked for proof of how Asha's things ended up covered in the family's DNA. Police got their hands on texts that reportedly admit to being involved or knowing exactly what happened to her, even though actual words in those messages haven't been released by the investigators quite yet. Those texts were sent between dead man family members and could finally prove exactly what went down after Asha was spotted walking along Highway 18 that night. By late 2025, no murder charges are filed yet, but Roy Dedman is the main suspect in the kidnapping and death of Asha Degree. Police are now digging through over 40 electronics and devices taken from his various properties. Why Asha left her house that night is still a mystery, even with all these new breaks in the case. Theories vary from her being groomed by someone at her school or local church to a random run-in with the dead man family that spiraled way out of control. Maybe it was a planned kidnapping where she was tricked into trusting someone she shouldn't have. Her mother, Asha Degree, still has hope, saying she believes her daughter is alive. But the murder charge shows police have seen evidence the public doesn't know about yet. A $45,000 reward is still out there for any helpful info. However, recent moves suggest investigators might have enough to make arrests without any more tips. This next case asks if a young woman died by nature or by human hands. Michelle Von Emster. In 1994, 25-year-old Michelle was found dead in the ocean off San Diego's Sunset Cliffs. The injuries on her body sparked an immediate debate about whether she was the victim of a wild animal or a killer. Her left leg was totally gone, and the bone looked like it had been snapped perfectly clean. The medical examiner officially called her death the result of a shark attack. That's still what the death certificate says to this very day, even though top experts like Ralph Collier and David Charbonneau strongly disagree. Michelle was a cancer survivor who had faced dark times before, including trouble with religious figures. She struggled with substance issues and lived a drifting lifestyle around San Diego, working at an art store while crashing in many different temporary places. Her life circumstances put her in touch with many different people, lacking the stable routines or social support that might have kept a closer eye on her. But the autopsy of Vonster's remains brought up facts that challenged the predator theory. They actually found sand deep inside her lungs, meaning she was breathing it in while alive, which suggests she was gasping for air on the beach, not just drowning out in the ocean. Shark expert Ralph Collier pointed out that her femur had snapped cleanly, arguing this didn't match the jagged sawing motion you would see from a great white shark's teeth, though the medical examiner disagreed, claiming a spiral fracture like that could happen from a massive predator's powerful bite. Forensics confirmed she was alive when the injuries happened, which rules out damage caused by scavengers after she had passed. Ralph Collier, the expert who looked at the case, stated that the break on Michelle's leg just didn't look like a shark attack, fueling doubts about the official story. Collier explained that most shark attacks leave very specific bite marks, tooth rake patterns, and crush injuries that were nowhere to be found on Vonster. Since those signs were missing, and the leg separation was so unusual, many believe other darker explanations need to be looked at seriously. Two people became persons of interest because they were known to be near Michelle right before she went missing. Edwin Decker, an acquaintance who knew her from the San Diego social scene, was one person investigators looked at closely, though they never found any physical evidence that actually linked him to what happened that night. Another unnamed person, known for having a strange obsession with Vonster, was also treated as a potential suspect for a while. However, no personal details about this man were ever released, and no one was ever charged in this part of the probe. If a human was involved, the true motive remains a total mystery. Some think it was an accident during a fight, with the killer trying to make it look like a shark did it. Or maybe she was silenced because of something she saw, or perhaps her struggle with addiction put her in a room with dangerous people. That sand in her lungs strongly suggests she was alive on the beach, held down or incapacitated maybe, while these injuries occurred under circumstances that the current evidence just can't fully explain. To this day, the official cause of death hasn't been solved, staying classified as undetermined instead of an accident or murder. This labels the case as a mystery, acknowledging the conflicting expert views without picking a side on what happened at Sunset Cliffs. The debate between a shark and a human culprit has lived on through true crime shows and biology reports, yet no one can agree even after decades of looking at it. Recent coverage by BuzzFeed's Unsolved and other crime media has kept this cold case in the spotlight. Still, no new forensic proof has surfaced to settle the big question of whether nature or a person is responsible. The San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office still keeps the file open because of that undetermined ruling. But there's very little active investigation happening right now, unless some fresh evidence or a new witness finally comes forward to speak. That is all for our report today. Thanks for watching. Click here for our next video.